My parents gifted my $500,000 home to my sister in secret, so I cut all funding, and now the bank is seizing it. They begged at my door with their bags, but I called the cops. If you want to understand how a person can blindly hand over 4 years of their life, their sweat, and their hard-earned money to the very people who are actively destroying them, you have to understand the dynamic of a family built on favoritism. You have to understand what it means to be the invisible daughter. I am 27 years old now, but for as long as I can remember, my role in my family was to simply exist quietly in the background while my younger sister, Bella, took center stage. Bella was the golden child. It was never a secret, and my mother, Evelyn, and my stepdad, Henry, never even tried to hide it. When Bella turned 16, there was a brand new Mercedes with a giant red bow sitting in our driveway. When I turned 16, Evelyn handed me a bus pass and told me that public transportation builds character. When Bella went to college, my parents took out loans to send her to a private university out of state, paying for her tuition, her luxury dorm room, and her sorority fees. When I graduated high school, I worked 2 jobs to pay my way through the local community college, exhausted and running on empty, while listening to Evelyn brag to her friends about Bella's college adventures. I was never abused in the traditional sense. I was just tolerated. I was the reliable, boring, self-sufficient older sister who never asked for anything because I knew the answer would be no. But there was one person in the world who saw me, who actually loved me without conditions, and that was my grandmother. My father's mother. She was a quiet, practical woman who lived in a beautiful, sturdy house out in the suburbs. It wasn't a mansion, but it was sitting on a large plot of land, surrounded by old oak trees and a garden she tended to every single day. That house was my safe haven. Whenever the blatant favoritism at home became too much to bear, I would take the bus out to the suburbs and sit on my grandmother's porch. She would make me tea, listen to my teenage problems, and make me feel like I actually mattered. When I was 23, my grandmother passed away. It broke my heart, but amidst the grief, the reading of her will brought a shock that rattled my entire family. She left her house, completely paid off and debt-free, solely to me. Not to Evelyn, not to Henry, and certainly not to Bella. Just me. The deed was transferred into my name, and for the first time in my life, I owned something permanent. I moved in immediately. I loved that house. I loved the quiet mornings, the sound of the birds, and the lingering scent of my grandmother's lavender soap. I got a good job in the city, working in corporate logistics. The only downside was the commute. Getting from the deep suburbs to the heart of the city took me over an hour and a half each way. I was spending 3 hours a day sitting in traffic, but I didn't care. I had my own sanctuary. I was independent. But looking back, I realize now that inheriting that house put a target on my back. Evelyn and Henry lived in a stunning, modern, $500,000 home, much closer to the city. It had an open floor plan, a massive kitchen, and a meticulously landscaped yard. But it also came with a massive mortgage that they were struggling to manage as they approached retirement age. They had drained a lot of their resources funding Bella's extravagant lifestyle, though they would never admit that out loud. I was living in a paid-off house, and they were drowning in monthly payments for theirs. It was a mathematical imbalance that Evelyn's manipulative mind simply could not accept. And so, she formulated a plan. A plan so insidious, wrapped so perfectly in the guise of maternal love, that my emotionally starved 23-year-old self walked right into the trap without a single second thought. When you grow up desperately craving your mother's affection, you don't question the poison in the bread she finally offers you. You just eat it and say thank you. The trap was set on a crisp Sunday afternoon. Evelyn and Henry came out to the suburbs to visit me, which was a rare occurrence. Evelyn even brought a homemade apple pie, something she usually only baked for Bella's birthdays. We sat on the porch, eating pie and drinking coffee, and she played her role perfectly. She looked at me with this expression of deep, maternal concern that I had spent my entire childhood praying to see. She reached across the table and patted my hand. She told me how proud she was of me. She said she saw how hard I was working at my corporate job, how tired I looked from the grueling 3-hour daily commute. She said it was breaking her heart to see her eldest daughter exhausting herself on the highway every single day. And then she dropped the idea. It was so casual, so smooth, like she had just thought of it right then and there. She said that she and Henry were getting older and the big city house was becoming too much for them to maintain. They wanted a quieter life. They wanted my grandmother's house. She proposed a house swap. I would pack up and move into their $500,000 city house, cutting my commute down to 20 minutes. They would move into my paid-off suburban sanctuary. All I had to do, she explained with a warm smile, was take over the mortgage payments for the city house. I hesitated. I remember holding my coffee mug, looking at the yard my grandmother loved, feeling a twinge of protectiveness. I asked the logical question. I asked about the paperwork. Shouldn't we go to the bank? Shouldn't we legally transfer the deeds? If I was going to pay the mortgage on their house and they were going to live in my house, shouldn't we make it official on paper? Evelyn laughed. It was a light, dismissive laugh that made me feel silly for even asking. She waved her hand in the air and gave me a look of gentle disappointment. She said that getting the bank involved would mean refinancing, closing costs, and thousands of dollars in unnecessary legal fees. She looked me right in the eyes and delivered the fatal blow. She said, "We are family. Don't you trust your own mother? We don't need lawyers to complicate things between us. You just make the payments, and once the mortgage is completely paid off, we'll do a clean swap of the deeds. It's an investment in your future." Henry nodded enthusiastically, adding that it was the smartest financial move I could make. I should have seen the red flags. I should have recognized that keeping the city house in their name meant I was building their equity, not mine. I should have realized that giving them keys to my legally owned, debt-free property without a lease agreement was a massive risk. But I was 23. I was sitting across from the mother who had ignored me for 2 decades, and she was finally telling me she wanted to help me build a future. She was treating me like an equal, a partner in a family decision. The psychological manipulation was flawless. I desperately wanted to believe that this was her way of making up for the past. I wanted the shorter commute, yes, but more than anything, I wanted to belong to the family. So, I ignored the nagging voice in the back of my head. I smiled, I thanked them for their generosity, and I agreed to the verbal arrangement. I handed them the keys to my grandmother's house, and I packed my bags for the city, completely unaware that I was signing up for 4 years of financial slavery. For 4 long years, I lived in that city house, and I poured my absolute soul into it. I treated that $500,000 property as if my name was written in bold ink on the deed. Every single month, like clockwork, I transferred the mortgage payment into Evelyn's bank account so she could pay the bank. But I didn't just pay the minimum. I was making good money at my logistics job, and my goal was to get the house completely paid off so we could finalize the official deed swap. I lived frugally. I didn't take vacations, I rarely ate out, and I drove a 10-year-old Honda. Any extra money I had, I sent to Evelyn, specifically instructing her to apply it to the principal balance of the mortgage. According to my meticulous spreadsheets, I was crushing the debt. By my calculations, after 4 years of aggressive overpayments, there was only about $50,000 left on the loan. 2 more years, I thought, and the house would be free and clear. 2 more years and the deed would be mine. But my investment wasn't just financial. It was intensely physical. The city house was spacious, but the interior was dated. Because I believed I was building my own permanent future, I decided to upgrade it. I spent my weekends in dirty overalls, covered in paint and drywall dust. I completely gutted the master bathroom. I ripped out the old linoleum floors and laid down beautiful, dark oak hardwood throughout the entire first floor with my own 2 hands. When the ancient heating and cooling system finally died during a freezing winter, I didn't call Evelyn to pay for it. I drained $10,000 from my own savings account to install a state-of-the-art HVAC system, because in my mind, it was my house. I was increasing my own property value. I remember painting the living room a soft, warm gray. I remember standing back, wiping sweat from my forehead, looking at the modern kitchen appliances I had purchased, and feeling a deep, profound sense of pride. I felt secure. I had an incredibly short commute to a job I excelled at, I lived in a gorgeous neighborhood, and I genuinely believed that Evelyn and Henry and I had finally found a healthy family dynamic. We didn't talk much, but the arrangement felt solid. Meanwhile, Bella was living her best life. She had graduated from her expensive private college with a degree she wasn't using, and she was planning a lavish wedding to a guy named Connor. Connor was exactly the kind of guy Evelyn loved. He came from a family with money, he dressed well, and he drove a nice car, but he didn't actually seem to have a steady career. Evelyn was constantly posting on social media about Bella's wedding planning, the expensive venues, the catering tastings, the designer dress. I watched it all from a distance, feeling a little sting of the old jealousy, but I pushed it down. I told myself that it didn't matter. Bella could have the fairy tale wedding paid for by my parents. I had a $500,000 house that was almost completely paid off. I was the smart one. I was the responsible one. I was securing my financial independence. I had no idea that while I was on my hands and knees grouting bathroom tiles, while I was eating ramen noodles to send extra $1,000 payments to my mother, they were looking at me and laughing. I had no idea that I wasn't a homeowner in training. I was just a tenant. A free property manager. A very naive, very desperate ATM machine funding a lifestyle I wasn't invited to be a part of. The illusion of my perfect little life was about to be shattered in the most brutal way possible. The unraveling of my life started at the end of October, right after Bella's extravagant, over-the-top wedding. I had attended the ceremony, smiled for the photos, and given them a generous cash gift. The very next day, my company sent me on a grueling, 2-week corporate logistics summit across the country. For 14 days, my life consisted of cheap hotel coffee, endless spreadsheet presentations, stuffy conference rooms, and living out of a suitcase. The physical exhaustion was deep in my bones. All I wanted, the only thought keeping me sane during that long flight back, was the image of my house. I wanted to unlock my front door, walk across the hardwood floors I had installed, take a long, hot shower in the bathroom I had remodeled, and sleep for 12 hours in my own bed. My flight landed late. By the time I navigated through the airport, grabbed my luggage, and took a rideshare back to my neighborhood, it was a little past 8 in the evening. The air was freezing, the kind of sharp, biting cold that makes your lungs ache. The rideshare dropped me off at the end of my driveway. I thanked the driver, grabbed the handle of my heavy suitcase, and started walking toward the house. That was when the first wave of confusion hit me. There was a sleek, silver Audi parked in my driveway. I didn't own an Audi. I stared at it for a moment, my exhausted brain struggling to process the information. Maybe someone was visiting a neighbor and took my spot? I looked up at the house. The porch light was blazing, and I could see the warm glow of the living room lamps shining through the front windows. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of a television playing inside. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through my chest. My first thought was logical but terrifying. Someone had broken in. Someone was inside my house. I gripped the handle of my suitcase tighter, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. I walked up the porch steps as quietly as I could, my breath pluming in the cold air. I reached into my purse, my fingers frantically searching for my keychain. I found it, pulled out the familiar brass house key, and slid it into the deadbolt. It didn't turn. I frowned, pulling it out and trying again, thinking maybe the cold had jammed the mechanism. I jiggled it. I pushed harder. Nothing. The key slid into the cylinder, but the pins wouldn't catch. The lock had been changed. The panic was immediate and suffocating. I dropped my suitcase on the porch. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I was standing in the freezing cold, locked out of my own home, with strangers' cars in my driveway and someone watching TV in my living room. I stepped back, looking at the front door, my mind racing through a dozen horrific scenarios. Had Evelyn sold the house without telling me? Had the bank foreclosed on it? Was this a squatter situation? I raised my fist, ready to bang on the heavy wooden door, ready to yell, ready to call the police. But before my knuckles could even strike the wood, I heard the deadbolt click from the inside. The handle turned. The door swung open, spilling the warm, yellow light of my hallway out into the freezing night. And there, standing in the doorway, was the absolute last person on earth I expected to see. Standing right there in the doorway, blocking my path, was my 22-year-old sister Bella. She was wearing my thick, expensive fluffy robe, the one I had bought myself for my birthday. On her feet were my favorite memory foam slippers. She was holding a mug of tea, leaning against the doorframe with an expression of mild annoyance, like I was a door-to-door salesman interrupting her evening. I looked past her shoulder into the living room. Connor, her new husband, was lounging on my custom-ordered sofa. He was wearing sweatpants, watching a sports game on my television, and his bare feet were propped up right on the center of the oak coffee table I had restored myself. He glanced over at the door, saw me standing there freezing, gave a lazy little wave, and looked back at the TV. My brain completely short-circuited. "Bella," I managed to say, my voice trembling. What are you doing here? Why is your car in my driveway? Why was the door locked?" Bella took a slow sip of her tea, letting out a soft sigh. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked completely, utterly entitled. "Oh, hey Avery," she said casually. "You're back early. Mom said your conference didn't end until tomorrow." "Answer the question, Bella," I snapped, my voice rising, the panic rapidly turning into a blinding, white-hot rage. "Why did my key not work? What are you doing in my house?" Bella rolled her eyes, the exact same dramatic, dismissive eye roll our mother always used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "It's not your house, Avery," she said smoothly. "Mom and Dad gave it to us. It's our wedding present. We moved in 3 days ago." The world actually tilted. I felt dizzy, my stomach dropping so fast I thought I was going to throw up right there on the porch. "A wedding present?" I repeated, the words sounding like a foreign language. "Are you out of your mind? I have been paying the mortgage on this house for 4 years. I remodeled that kitchen. I laid the floors Connor is walking on. This is my home." "Yeah, well, the deed is in Mom and Dad's name, and they gifted it to us to start our new family," Bella said, shrugging her shoulders like we were discussing the weather. "Mom said you were just renting anyway. She said you knew this was a temporary arrangement." Renting. Temporary arrangement. The words hit me like physical blows. The 4 years of extra payments. The $10,000 heating system. The weekends covered in drywall dust. Evelyn had watched me bleed my bank account dry to upgrade this house, knowing the entire time she was going to hand it over to her golden child the moment Bella got married. They used me to fix up their asset, and when it was ready, they threw me away. "Where is my stuff?" I demanded, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. I was shaking, but not from the cold anymore. "Oh, the movers put it in the garage," Bella said, waving her hand toward the side of the house. "You need to get it out of there by the weekend, though. Connor wants to set up his home gym. Anyway, it's late, and we're tired. You need to leave. Get off our property." She stepped back and started to close the door. I lunged forward, slamming my hand flat against the wood, stopping it from shutting. For a second, a flash of genuine fear crossed Bella's face. I looked right into her eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the spoiled, pampered little princess who had just stolen 4 years of my life. "You tell Connor to enjoy the sofa," I whispered. "Because it's the last comfortable thing either of you are going to experience for a very long time." I pulled my hand back. Bella slammed the door shut, and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I was left standing in the dark, locked out of the house I had paid for, my entire life packed into cardboard boxes in a freezing garage. I don't remember walking back to the street. I don't remember ordering the rideshare to take me to the car rental place at the airport. My mind was completely detached from my body. I operated on pure, mechanical adrenaline. I rented the cheapest sedan they had, threw my single suitcase in the trunk, and got on the highway. The drive to the suburbs took an hour and a half. The roads were empty, dark, and silent. During that drive, the reality of my situation crushed down on me. I had $32 in my checking account because I had just sent Evelyn a massive extra mortgage payment right before my business trip. All my savings were tied up in the renovations of a house I no longer had access to. I was officially homeless. As the highway lines blurred past, the desperate, pathetic little girl inside me who just wanted her mother's love finally died. She withered away in the passenger seat of that rental car, replaced by a cold, calculating, terrifying clarity. I wasn't sad. I was empty, and in that emptiness, a brutal need for justice took root. It was past 10 in the evening when I pulled into the driveway of my grandmother's house, the house Evelyn and Henry were living in. The house that legally belonged to me. The porch light was off, but a dim light was on in the master bedroom. I marched up the steps, my boots echoing loudly on the wood. I didn't bother using the doorbell. I curled my hand into a fist and pounded on the front door, the heavy, rhythmic thuds breaking the silence of the quiet suburban street. I pounded until my knuckles bruised. "Evelyn!" I shouted, not Mom, but Evelyn. "Open the door. Open the damn door right now." I heard movement inside. The hallway light flicked on. I saw the shadow of my mother moving behind the frosted glass of the front door. I waited for the lock to turn, but it didn't. Instead, Evelyn's voice came through the thick wood, muffled but unmistakably annoyed. "Avery, stop screaming like a maniac," she hissed through the door. "You are waking the neighbors. Open the door, Evelyn. Bella is in my house. She changed the locks. She said you gave her the house. Tell me it's a sick joke." "It's not a joke," Henry's voice boomed from behind Evelyn. "It's our house, and we gave it to your sister. She's married now. She needs a place to build a family." I pressed my forehead against the cold wood of the door. "I paid the mortgage for 4 years. I paid extra. I bought the appliances. I fixed the roof. You told me we would swap the deeds. You promised me." "Oh, grow up, Avery," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with that sickening, patronizing tone. "You lived in a beautiful house in a great neighborhood for 4 years. The money you sent was just rent. We never signed any papers. You were a tenant. Now, stop being dramatic, go rent an apartment somewhere, and leave us alone. Stop making a scene. Just rent. No papers." The words echoed in my head. I stood on the porch of the house my grandmother built, the house she left to me, listening to the people who were supposed to protect me tell me that my life's work was nothing more than a convenient donation to their favorite child. "You stole from me," I said quietly, my voice eerily calm. "We didn't steal anything. Go away, Avery. I mean it. If you don't leave my porch, Henry will call the police." I took a step back. I looked at the dark windows, the manicured lawn I used to mow as a teenager. "Your porch," I repeated softly to myself. A dark, bitter smile slowly spread across my face. They were so blinded by their greed, so confident in their ability to manipulate me, that they had forgotten the most important detail of our entire arrangement. They forgot who actually owned the ground they were standing on. "Okay, Evelyn," I said loudly, turning away from the door. "I'll go." I walked back to my rental car, the freezing wind whipping my hair around my face. I got into the driver's seat, turned on the ignition, and watched the hallway light in the house flick off. They went back to bed, thinking they had won. Thinking they had successfully discarded me. They had no idea the absolute hellfire they had just unleashed upon themselves. Thank you for watching this story so far. If you are enjoying the drama, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me the name of the city you are currently living in. Every single comment helps push this video to more people who love crazy family stories just like this one. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get back to the revenge. I drove away from my grandmother's house and headed toward the cheapest motel I could find on the outskirts of the suburbs. It was a rundown place with a flickering neon sign, the kind of establishment where you pay in cash and do not ask for extra towels. I paid $45 for a single night, took the physical key from the tired clerk behind the reinforced glass, and walked to my room. The air inside smelled of stale smoke and heavy industrial cleaner. I sat down on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at the peeling wallpaper. I was physically exhausted, running on absolutely zero sleep, but my mind was sharper than it had been in my entire life. The emotional fog of hoping for my family's love had completely burned away, leaving behind a stark, brilliant clarity. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket and opened my banking app. The bright screen illuminated the dark, dingy room. I navigated to the automatic payments section. There it was. The monthly transfer set up to go directly into Evelyn's checking account. A massive chunk of my hard-earned salary, scheduled to depart in exactly 3 days to pay for a house that was currently occupied by Bella and her arrogant husband. My thumb hovered over the screen. For 4 years, I had made this transfer without fail. I had sacrificed vacations, new clothes, and peace of mind just to ensure this payment went through, believing I was buying my future. I pressed the cancel button. A small pop-up asked if I was sure I wanted to permanently delete this recurring payment. I pressed yes. The payment vanished from the screen. Just like that, the funding was completely cut. I tossed the phone onto the cheap bedspread and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the water stains on the ceiling. I started to analyze the situation not as a grieving daughter, but as a strategist. Evelyn and Henry thought they held all the cards. They owned the city house legally. They had the deed, which meant they had the absolute right to gift it to Bella. They had successfully used me for free labor and mortgage payments, and because we never signed a single piece of paper, I had no legal right to demand the city house back. In their minds, they had pulled off the perfect heist. But arrogant people always make one critical mistake. They get so greedy that they forget to cover their own vulnerabilities. Evelyn and Henry were so focused on securing the $500,000 city house for Bella that they completely ignored the legal reality of the ground they were sleeping on. My grandmother had left her house to me. The deed to that quiet, sprawling suburban property was firmly, legally, and undeniably in my name. When we made our little verbal house swap agreement 4 years ago, they had never asked me to sign the property over to them. Why? Because they did not want to pay the massive property transfer taxes, and they assumed I was too docile, too eager for their approval, to ever challenge them. They were living in my house. There was no lease agreement. There was no rent being paid. In the eyes of the law, they were not even tenants. They were merely long-term guests who had overstayed their welcome. They had just thrown me out into the freezing cold without a second thought. Now, it was time for them to learn exactly what it felt like to lose the roof over their heads. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since I found my key jammed in that lock, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized they held the ultimate trump card. I was going to take everything from them, and I was going to do it completely by the book. First thing the next morning, I did not go to work. I called my boss, explained I was dealing with a sudden family emergency, and requested a few days of personal leave. Then, I sat in my rental car in the motel parking lot and searched for the most ruthless property litigation attorney in the area. I found a firm that specialized in fast, aggressive evictions. By 9 in the morning, I was sitting in a plush leather chair in an upscale office, across a heavy mahogany desk from a man named Mr. Harrison. He was older, sharp-eyed, wearing an impeccably tailored suit, and he radiated the kind of expensive intimidation that I desperately needed. I laid the entire story out for him. I told him about the verbal agreement, the 4 years of extra mortgage payments, the renovations, the lockout, and the fact that my parents were currently residing in a property that I legally owned free and clear. I slid a copy of my grandmother's deed across the desk, along with printouts from the county tax assessor showing my name as the sole proprietor. Mr. Harrison reviewed the documents in complete silence. He didn't offer any fake sympathy. He didn't tell me how sorry he was that my family had betrayed me. He just looked at the papers, tapped his expensive pen on the desk, and gave a short, approving nod. He explained the law to me in clear, simple terms. Because there was no written lease, and because they had never paid me a single dime in rent, Evelyn and Henry were classified as at-will tenants, or even just unauthorized occupants, depending on how aggressively we wanted to frame it. He told me we did not need to give them a standard 30-day notice. Because of the hostile nature of the situation and their refusal to grant me access to my own property the night before, he could draft a formal 3-day notice to quit. If they did not pack up and leave my grandmother's house within exactly 72 hours, he would file a lawsuit, get a court order, and have the local sheriff physically remove them and their belongings from the premises. They will fight it, I told him, remembering the smug look on Evelyn's face. They think they are untouchable. Mr. Harrison offered a cold, professional smile. Everybody thinks they are untouchable until a uniformed officer shows up at their door with a court mandate. Let me worry about their attitude. You just authorized me to act on your behalf. I paid his retainer fee right there on the spot. It drained the last little bit of emergency credit I had on my credit card, but I did not care. Handing over that card was the most empowering purchase I had ever made. I was buying a weapon. I was buying justice. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the passenger seat of Mr. Harrison's sleek black sedan as we pulled up to my grandmother's house. It was the middle of the day. The neighborhood was quiet. Mr. Harrison grabbed his leather briefcase, stepped out of the car, and walked briskly up the driveway. I followed a few steps behind him. He did not pound on the door like I had done the night before. He gave 3 sharp, authoritative knocks that echoed with legal weight. After a few moments, the door opened. Evelyn stood there, wearing her comfortable houseclothes, a look of deep annoyance on her face that instantly melted into confusion when she saw a man in a $1,000 suit standing on her porch. She looked past him, saw me standing on the lawn, and her eyes narrowed. "Avery, what is the meaning of this?" she demanded, stepping out onto the porch. "Who is this?" "Good morning, ma'am," Mr. Harrison said. His voice was smooth, but incredibly hard. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder of official documents. "I am legal counsel representing the property owner, Miss Avery. I am here to officially serve you with a 3-day notice to vacate the premises." He held the papers out toward her. Evelyn just stared at them, the color rapidly draining from her face. The reality of the situation was finally knocking at her front door. Evelyn refused to take the papers. She crossed her arms over her chest and took a step back, as if the legal documents were physically radioactive. "This is absurd," she stammered, her voice losing all its usual authority. "You cannot evict us. This is our home. We made a deal. A verbal agreement regarding a separate property does not grant you legal tenancy here, ma'am," Mr. Harrison replied calmly, placing the documents on a small patio table right next to the door. "You are currently occupying this property without a lease and without the owner's consent. You have exactly 3 days to remove yourselves and all your belongings. If you fail to comply, I will return with law enforcement to execute a forcible eviction. The clock starts right now. Have a pleasant afternoon." Henry came rushing to the door, his face red with anger. He saw the papers, looked at the lawyer, and started shouting threats. He yelled that they would sue me, that they would take me to court for the money they spent feeding me as a child, that they would ruin my life. Mr. Harrison did not even flinch. He simply turned his back on them, walked down the driveway, and motioned for me to get back into the car. As we drove away, I looked in the side mirror and saw Evelyn and Henry standing on the porch, staring at the eviction notice like it was a bomb about to go off. Those next 3 days felt like an eternity. I stayed in my cheap motel room, jumping every time my phone vibrated. I expected Evelyn to call and scream. I expected Bella to text me awful things. But my phone remained completely silent. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. It meant they had consulted their own lawyer. It meant they had been told the exact same thing Mr. Harrison had told me. They had no case. They had no rights to my grandmother's house. They had to pack up their entire lives in 72 hours. On the morning of the 4th day, Mr. Harrison called me. He told me the property had been vacated. I drove straight from the motel to the suburbs. When I turned onto my street, I saw a large, rented moving truck parked in the driveway. Evelyn and Henry were dragging the last few boxes out of the garage. They looked exhausted, disheveled, and deeply furious. There was no carefully constructed facade of maternal love anymore. The masks were completely off. I parked my rental car across the street and simply watched them. Evelyn saw me. She dropped the box she was carrying, marched right up to the edge of the property line, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You are a monster," she screamed, her voice cracking, echoing down the quiet street. "After everything we did for you, after we put a roof over your head, you throw your own parents out onto the street? You are a traitor. You are no daughter of mine." I leaned against the door of my car and looked at her. I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt. No sadness. Just a profound, empty peace. "You're right, Evelyn," I called back, my voice steady and clear. "I never was your daughter. I was just your bank account. And the bank is permanently closed." Henry grabbed her arm, muttering angrily, and pulled her toward their car. They got in, slammed the doors, and the moving truck followed them out of the neighborhood. They had nowhere to go but to scramble for a short-term rental or crash on a friend's couch. I watched their taillights disappear around the corner. Then I walked up the driveway, unlocked the front door with my key, and stepped inside. The house was a mess. There were boxes left behind, trash on the floor, and scratches on the walls. But the bones of the house were solid. I took a deep breath, inhaling the faint, lingering scent of my grandmother's old wood furniture. I was back where I belonged. I had lost 4 years of money, but I had reclaimed my sanctuary. A full month passed. I spent those 4 weeks meticulously cleaning my grandmother's house, erasing every single trace of Evelyn and Henry. I painted over the scuff marks, threw away the junk they left behind, and slowly started bringing my life out of the cardboard boxes Bella had dumped in the garage. I settled back into my old routine, adjusting to the long commute to the city again. It was tiring, but driving 3 hours a day was a very small price to pay for my freedom. I had not heard a single word from my family. I had blocked their numbers, blocked them on social media, and instructed the security at my corporate office not to let them into the building. I assumed the war was over. I had my house, they had their house, and we would never speak again. I was wrong. The financial time bomb I had planted when I canceled that automatic bank transfer was ticking, and it finally exploded on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking a cup of tea, when my phone rang. The caller ID was a random unknown number. Thinking it was a work client, I answered. The moment the voice came through the speaker, my stomach tightened. It was Evelyn. She must have bought a prepaid phone just to bypass my block. "Where is the money, Avery?" she demanded. There was no greeting, no fake pleasantries. Her voice was shrill, desperate, and dripping with an entitlement that literally made my jaw drop. "The bank sent us a notice. They hit us with massive late fees. You missed the mortgage payment this month. Transfer the money immediately." I let out a laugh that was entirely devoid of humor. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Are you actually insane?" I asked, gripping my phone tight. "You lock me out of the house I spent 4 years paying for. You give it to Bella as a wedding present. You tell me I was just a tenant. And you honestly think I am going to keep paying for it?" "We had an agreement," she screamed, the panic breaking through her angry facade. "You promised to pay the mortgage. You cannot just stop. You are ruining our credit." "Your credit is not my problem," I replied smoothly, enjoying the absolute power of this moment. "You gave the house to Bella. Bella and Connor live there now. It is their wedding gift. So, tell the golden child to pay the mortgage. Tell Connor to get a job and pay for the roof over his head. I am done. Bella cannot afford the payments." Evelyn wailed, hitting a hysterical pitch. "She just graduated. They are just starting out. You are the one with the corporate job. You are the one who is supposed to pay it off." "Well, too bad," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Besides, what are you crying about? Based on all the extra thousands of dollars I sent you every single month, the loan should be almost entirely paid off anyway. What is the balance now? $50,000? Surely you and Henry can cover a tiny $50,000 balance on a $500,000 property." There was a sudden, dead silence on the other end of the line. It was not an angry silence. It was the terrified, suffocating silence of someone who had just been caught in a massive lie. The silence stretched on for 5 seconds. 10 seconds. "Evelyn." I prompted, a cold dread starting to creep into my own voice. What is the balance on that house? I heard her take a shaky breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was tiny, defensive, and sickeningly guilty. It is not $50,000, Avery. How much is it? I demanded, standing up from the kitchen table. It is $150,000. The world seemed to stop spinning. The numbers did not make sense. My brain rapidly calculated the years of payments, the massive extra principal payments I had sent, the strict budget I had lived on. That is a lie, I shouted, my voice echoing off the kitchen walls. That is mathematically impossible. I sent you extra money every single month. I sent you thousands of dollars meant for the principal. Where did that money go, Evelyn? Where is my money? Evelyn's initial panic vanished, quickly replaced by her default setting, arrogant justification. She spoke to me as if I were a child who simply did not understand how the adult world worked. Do not use that tone with me, Avery, she scolded, though her voice still carried a slight tremor. We used the regular monthly amount to pay the base mortgage, obviously. But the extra money you sent, well, we had family expenses. We had to reallocate those funds for the good of the family. Reallocate? I whispered, my vision literally tunneling. Family expenses? Yes, she said, sounding annoyed that she even had to explain this to me. You know how expensive things have been. Henry and I needed a vacation to decompress, so we went to Europe for 3 weeks. And Bella's college tuition was astronomical. We had to help her out. Then there was her wedding, the catering, the flowers. You cannot expect us to live like paupers just so you can pay off a house a little faster. We are family. Family shares the burden. I sank slowly to the kitchen floor, my back sliding against the cabinets. The betrayal was so profound, so layered, that I could not even form words. For 4 years, I had eaten cheap food, worn old clothes, and worked overtime, believing I was securing a debt-free home. Meanwhile, my mother was taking the money I bled for, pocketing it, and using it to fly to Paris. She was using my sweat and labor to buy Bella a designer wedding dress. They had never intended to pay the house off early. They had simply turned me into their own private, interest-free ATM machine, skimming thousands of dollars off the top while legally keeping the debt in their own name. You stole from me, I finally managed to say, my voice completely hollow. You committed fraud. You took money designated for a mortgage and you spent it on vacations. Oh, stop throwing around words like fraud, Evelyn scoffed. You sent the money to my bank account. It was a gift. You were helping your parents. Any good daughter would be proud to support her family. You are going to lose that house, I said, a dark, terrible realization settling over me. Without my money, you cannot make the payments. And you just gave the house to a 22-year-old girl who does not have a job. The bank is going to take it. No, they will not. Evelyn snapped, pure desperation bleeding back into her voice. Because you are going to unblock my bank account and you are going to transfer the money right now. If we lose that house, it will be your fault. You will be destroying your sister's life. Good, I said softly. I hope they take the house. I hope they take the cars. I hope you lose every single thing you own. I hung up the phone. I did not just block the new number. I called my cell phone provider and had my own number completely changed. I was severing the final thread. The realization of what they had done with my money was devastating, but it also completely absolved me of any lingering guilt. They had built their entire luxury lifestyle on my back, and now the foundation was gone. I just had to sit back and watch the entire structure collapse. The next day, I needed to know exactly how bad the situation was. I needed facts, not Evelyn's twisted version of reality. I called a girl named Allison. Allison and I had gone to high school together, and she was currently working as a loan officer at the exact regional bank that held the mortgage on the city house. I invited her to a quiet coffee shop in the city on her lunch break. I bought her a latte, looked her in the eyes, and told her the entire story. I told her about the lockout, the eviction, and the phone call with Evelyn. Allison listened with wide eyes, her hand covering her mouth in shock. When I finished, she looked around the cafe nervously. What she was about to do was a massive violation of bank policy, but she hated Evelyn just as much as I did, having witnessed the favoritism back when we were teenagers. "Avery, I could get fired for telling you this," Allison whispered, leaning across the small table. "But you need to know. It is actually so much worse than your mother admitted on the phone." "Tell me," I said, my voice completely flat. "I need to know everything." Allison pulled out a small notepad and started drawing lines to explain the financial disaster. "Your parents didn't just pocket your extra cash. They actively used the equity you were building to fund their lifestyle. 2 years ago, when the property values in that neighborhood skyrocketed, they did a cash-out refinance." I closed my eyes. A cash-out refinance. It was the ultimate financial betrayal. "They took out a brand new loan against the house," Allison continued, her voice hushed. "They pulled out $80,000 in pure cash. They used that money to buy Bella that Mercedes for her graduation. They used it to pay for that massive honeymoon in the Maldives. They reset the clock on the mortgage, extended the term, and massively increased their monthly payment. They only approved it because they showed the bank your steady monthly deposits as proof of their income." It all made sickening sense now. They had literally borrowed money against the new kitchen I built. They had traded the hardwood floors I installed for a luxury vacation. They had trapped themselves in a massive, high-interest loan, assuming that their invisible, obedient daughter would simply keep paying it until the day they died. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now that my money is gone." Allison offered a grim, pitying smile. "They are drowning, Avery. Without your monthly transfer, they do not have enough income to cover the new, inflated mortgage payment, plus their car loans, plus their credit card debt. They missed last month's payment. They have already missed this month's payment. In my system, their account is flagged for pre-foreclosure. If they do not come up with thousands of dollars in the next 60 days, the bank is going to seize the property." I walked out of that coffee shop feeling a bizarre mixture of profound loss and absolute victory. I had lost a fortune. I would never see a single dime of the money I had poured into that house. But as I walked down the busy city sidewalk, pulling my coat tight against the wind, I realized that my financial loss was the price of a permanent, unbreakable freedom. I had accidentally set a trap that they had gleefully walked into. They had bet their entire financial future on my endless submission. They lost the bet. The absolute destruction of my family's financial empire did not happen in private. It happened loud, it happened fast, and it became the greatest piece of gossip my extended family had ever witnessed. Because I had changed my number, I did not hear the screaming directly. Instead, I got all the glorious, chaotic updates from my cousin Chelsea and my Aunt Clara, who called my work line just to give me the play-by-play. According to Aunt Clara, the panic set in about 2 weeks after Evelyn realized I was never sending another dollar. Evelyn and Henry, living in a cramped, overpriced month-to-month apartment, drove to the city house and demanded a family meeting. They sat Bella and Connor down on the custom sofa I had bought and dropped the bomb. They told Bella that the wedding gift came with strings attached. They demanded that Connor get a high-paying job immediately and that Bella start paying the $150,000 mortgage, plus the astronomical late fees. Bella's reaction was exactly what anyone would expect from a spoiled child who had never been told no. Cousin Chelsea told me the neighbors could hear the screaming from 3 houses down. Bella threw an absolute tantrum. She screamed that they had promised her a free house. She yelled that they had ruined her life and trapped her in debt. Connor, realizing that he had not married into a wealthy family, but rather a massive financial sinkhole, completely lost his temper. He accused Henry of scamming him. The argument escalated so badly that Henry actually called the police. He tried to have his own daughter and son-in-law removed from the property for trespassing, completely forgetting that he had publicly announced the house was a gift. The police arrived with lights flashing in the quiet, upscale neighborhood. They stood in the driveway, listening to this wealthy-looking family scream about fraud, debt, and broken promises. Because Bella had established residency, the police told Henry it was a civil matter and refused to throw her out. The public humiliation was absolute. But the dominoes kept falling. A week after the police incident, Connor packed his bags. The illusion of the rich, perfect family was broken, and he had no intention of working to pay off his in-laws' debt. He left Bella and filed for divorce, barely 2 months after the extravagant wedding. Bella, completely helpless and unable to pay the utility bills, let alone the mortgage, abandoned the house and moved into the cramped apartment with Evelyn and Henry. 3 incredibly toxic, angry people, trapped in a tiny space, blaming each other for their total ruin. Their credit was utterly destroyed. Aunt Clara told me they went to every bank in the city, begging for personal loans, trying to apply for a reverse mortgage, trying to consolidate their debt. But every single door was slammed in their faces. They had burned through their retirement funds paying for European vacations and luxury cars. The house of cards they had built on my back had completely collapsed in the span of 90 days. The final blow came 6 months after the night I was locked out. I was sitting in my grandmother's house, working on my laptop, when a notification popped up on my phone. It was an alert from a real estate website. The $500,000 city house, the house I had painted, remodeled, and bled for, was officially listed as a bank-owned foreclosure auction. The bank had seized it. Bella's dream home, Evelyn's equity piggy bank, was gone. 2 hours later, my Ring doorbell camera chimed. I opened the app on my phone and looked at the live video feed. Standing on my porch, shivering in the cold, were Evelyn and Henry. They looked a decade older. Henry's shoulders were slumped, and Evelyn's face was pale and drawn. At their feet were 4 large, black plastic trash bags filled with clothes. They had been evicted from their apartment for non-payment, and they had absolutely nowhere else to go. Evelyn looked up directly into the camera lens. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Avery," she pleaded, her voice cracking through the tiny speaker. "Please. We know you're in there. Please open the door. We lost everything. The bank took the house. Connor left Bella. We have no money and nowhere to sleep. Please, Avery. We are your family. I am your mother. You have to help us. Just let us stay in the spare room." I sat in my grandmother's rocking chair, staring at the screen. For years ago, the sound of my mother begging for my help would have made me rush to the door. I would have let them in, given them my bed, and emptied my bank account to save them. But the woman sitting in that rocking chair now felt absolutely nothing but a cold, heavy sense of justice. They did not love me. They were just out of victims. I didn't press the microphone button. I didn't yell at them. I didn't offer a dramatic speech about karma. I just picked up my cell phone, dialed the non-emergency police line, and calmly reported that 2 unauthorized individuals were trespassing on my private property and refusing to leave. Then I closed the app, put my phone on silent, and went back to my work. I didn't even look out the window when the cruiser pulled up to escort them away. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply allowing terrible people to face the exact consequences of their own actions. My grandmother used to say that you reap what you sow. Evelyn and Henry spent their entire lives planting seeds of manipulation, greed, and betrayal. They used my love as a financial tool, and they threw me away the second they thought they had secured their prize. Now, they get to harvest exactly what they planted. I lost years of savings, but I gained something priceless. I am finally, truly, and completely free. So, looking back at the eviction, the cut-off funding, and letting my own parents face homelessness after what they did, am I wrong? Should I have given them one last chance, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let me know what you would have done in the comments. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another crazy family drama. See you in the next video.